The sun had already set when Ethan Parker drove along the quiet road leading to his brother's house. He hadn't planned to stop by. He was only returning a few tools he had borrowed the week before. His mind was occupied with work deadlines and the long winter ahead. So when he stepped onto the porch and noticed the front door slightly open, he froze. His brother Daniel lived in a peaceful Vermont neighborhood where people rarely forgot to lock their doors. Seeing it ajar instantly raised a red flag. He pushed the door open gently, calling out, "Hello." The house didn't answer. Instead, a small sound came from the kitchen, a chair scraping, followed by a quiet sniffle. Ethan walked in quickly, his heart tightening. When he rounded the corner, he found his 8-year-old nephew Liam sitting alone at the kitchen table, his backpack beside him and a plate of untouched food in front of him. The little boy looked up with red eyes, trying to smile. "Uncle Ethan," he said softly, as if he wasn't sure if he should feel relieved or embarrassed. Ethan knelt beside him immediately. "Hey, buddy, why are you here alone?" Liam shrugged, staring down at his hands. "Mom had to leave. She told me to wait here until she came back. She said she would explain later." His voice shook slightly. That alone told Ethan everything he needed to know. Something had happened. Something serious enough that Rebecca, usually calm and prepared, didn't want her son to see. Ethan gently touched Liam's shoulder and tried to keep his own worry from showing. "Okay," he said in a steady voice. "How about we heat up some dinner? You hungry?" Liam nodded, though it was clear he had no appetite. Ethan warmed the food anyway, telling stories from work to distract the boy, keeping his words light even though his mind raced with questions. Rebecca wasn't the type to leave Liam alone without warning anyone, but his brother Daniel was away on a long overseas job, and Rebecca had been handling everything alone for months. Maybe today had been too much for her. Maybe she just needed a moment. Ethan couldn't judge. He just needed to keep Liam safe. After dinner, he helped Liam with homework, trying to keep the evening as normal as possible. The boy slowly relaxed, but Ethan didn't. He kept checking his phone, waiting for a message or call from Rebecca. Nothing came. Every silent minute made him more certain something had pushed her past her limits. The house felt heavier than usual, as if it knew more than it wanted to reveal. Ethan tried to ignore the uneasy feeling, focusing instead on Liam's math problems and the ticking clock on the wall. The hours stretched longer than they should have. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows, and Ethan wondered how long Rebecca intended to be gone. Finally, he sent Liam upstairs to get ready for bed. After the boy left the room, Ethan stood by the window staring into the night. He couldn't shake the feeling that Rebecca was carrying more than she let on. He had noticed the tiredness in her voice the last time they spoke, and the way she tried to hide her stress whenever Daniel's absence became too much. She was strong, yes, but strength had limits. Then headlights swept across the driveway. Ethan exhaled with relief, though tension still gripped him. He opened the door before she even reached it. Rebecca stepped out of her car slowly, not rushing, not pretending everything was fine. Her shoulders were slumped, her posture heavy, as if she had been holding up the world all day and finally allowed it to rest on her. Her eyes met Ethan's, and he saw something he had never seen in her before. Raw exhaustion mixed with defeat. But there was something else too, something quieter. Like a flicker of fear she was trying to hide. "I didn't know who else to call," she said in a shaky voice. Those 6 words told Ethan everything she wasn't able to say. Rebecca Parker was a woman who had spent years keeping her world in order. She handled her job, Liam, bills, school meetings, late nights, early mornings, and Daniel's long absences with a steady grace Ethan had always admired. She didn't lean on people. She didn't ask for help. For her to say she didn't know who else to call meant she had reached a breaking point. He stepped aside, letting her walk in. She looked around the kitchen where Liam's backpack still sat and sighed deeply. "Is he okay?" she asked quietly. "Yeah," Ethan replied. "I made dinner, helped with homework. He's upstairs getting ready for bed. She nodded relief, softening her expression for a moment before worry returned. She removed her coat, but her hands trembled slightly. She tried to hide it by folding the coat neatly on the chair, but Ethan noticed everything. He wanted to ask what had happened, but he didn't push. Instead, he said, "Take a moment if you need to. I'll stay until you're ready." For the first time since she arrived, Rebecca gave him a grateful smile, small one, but sincere. She leaned against the counter and took a slow breath, as if trying to gather herself. Ethan didn't stare, but he stayed close enough to show. She wasn't alone. Moments later, small footsteps echoed on the stairs. Liam appeared, eyes widening when he saw his mother. He ran to her, burying his face in her waist. She held him tightly, kissing the top of his head again and again, whispering soft reassurances. Ethan stayed back, giving them space, but he watched the moment closely. The way Rebecca clutched her son with trembling arms. The way Liam's fear slowly faded as he felt her warmth. The way the house finally felt alive again when Liam went back upstairs to brush his teeth. Rebecca turned to Ethan with a tired expression. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never wanted him to feel alone. I just couldn't hold it in anymore." Ethan shook his head gently. "Don't apologize. You did what you had to do." Her eyes softened, with the soft kitchen light on her face. She looked vulnerable in a way he had never seen before. Not weak, just human. She lowered her gaze and, in a quiet voice filled with a mix of relief and shame, she added, "Today, everything fell apart." Ethan stepped forward slightly, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel his presence. His voice stayed calm, supportive. "You're not alone anymore," he said. She looked up, the hint of gratitude returning. And in that fragile moment, something changed, something subtle, unspoken, and unexpected. She had reached out for help, and he had answered without knowing it. That single choice would change both of their lives in ways they couldn't yet see. Rebecca barely spoke a word as she walked into the living room. The soft lamplight revealed the exhaustion on her face more clearly than before. Her usual calm expression was replaced with a troubled look that made Ethan's chest tighten. He had always seen her as steady and composed, someone who held her home together even when Daniel was away. But tonight, she looked like someone who had been carrying too much for far too long. She sat on the couch slowly, as if her entire body had lost its strength. Ethan remained standing for a moment, unsure if she wanted comfort or space. He didn't want to overwhelm her, but he also didn't want her to feel alone. After a few seconds, he walked over and sat a safe distance away. "Rebecca," he said gently, "just tell me what happened." At first, she didn't answer. Her hands were clasped tightly together in her lap, knuckles white from the pressure. She stared at the floor, trying to hold herself together. The silence in the room felt heavy, like it carried every fear she had been hiding. Finally, her voice broke the stillness. "It's my job today." The words came out in a shaky whisper, and once they left her mouth, she took a long, shaky breath, as if releasing something she had been holding inside all day. Ethan felt the weight of her confession immediately. Losing a job was hard for anyone, but for her, handling bills, raising Liam alone while Daniel worked abroad, it was devastating. "I'm so sorry," Ethan said softly. She shook her head, brushing away tears before they could fall. "I didn't want Liam to see me break down. I didn't want him to worry. That's why I left him here. I just needed a moment to think before I faced him again." Her voice was filled with guilt, and Ethan saw how deeply the situation was affecting her. She wasn't someone who let herself fall apart easily. For her to admit this meant she was standing at the edge of her strength. "You did what you needed to do," Ethan reassured her. "You were protecting him." She gave a tired sigh. "Maybe, or maybe I'm just failing." Ethan leaned forward, speaking firmly but gently. "You are not failing. You're carrying everything alone. Anyone would feel overwhelmed." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "You're strong, Rebecca. But even strong people need support. For the first time that evening, she looked up at him directly. Her eyes were glossy, reflecting a mixture of relief and pain. "Why is it," she whispered, "that it's easier to fall apart in front of you than anyone else?" The question caught him off guard, not because of the words themselves, but because of how vulnerable she looked while asking it. He didn't want to misinterpret it or step over a line, but he couldn't ignore the emotional honesty behind it. "Because you don't have to pretend with me," he said simply. She held his gaze for a long moment, and in that silence, something unspoken passed between them, trust, maybe, or a quiet understanding that wasn't there before tonight. Ethan knew he had always respected her, but now he felt something deeper. He wanted to protect her from everything she'd been facing alone. Before the moment grew heavier, a small voice called from upstairs, "Mom, Uncle Ethan." Rebecca immediately wiped her eyes and sat up straighter. "Coming, sweetheart," she replied quickly, but Liam didn't come down. Instead, he peeked from the top of the stairs. "Is everything okay?" Ethan gave him a reassuring smile. "Everything's fine, buddy." Rebecca went to him and placed her hand on his shoulder. The way she touched him, gentle but filled with emotion, showed just how much she had been holding inside. Liam leaned against her, sensing more than he understood, and she kissed the top of his head before guiding him back to his room. Ethan stayed in the living room, giving them space, but he could hear their soft murmurs down the hallway. A few minutes later she returned, looking calmer but still worn out. Ethan stood by the window, waiting for her. When she came closer, he noticed her eyes were swollen, but her expression was steadier. "I'm sorry for how I acted earlier," she said quietly. "I shouldn't have panicked like that." "Yo?" "Don't owe me an apology," Ethan replied. "You're human." She let out a soft breath. It just felt like everything collapsed at once. "I sat in my car for 20 minutes because I couldn't walk in the house knowing Liam would ask why I looked upset." Ethan nodded, understanding more than she realized. You were trying to protect him, trying not to fall apart. She added with a fragile smile. He wanted to reach out and give her some kind of comfort, a hand on her arm, a reassuring gesture, but he kept his distance. He didn't want to misread the situation or make her uncomfortable. Instead, he offered support through his words. "You don't have to carry all this alone. I'm here, Rebecca, whatever you need." Her expression softened, as if his words had taken a little weight off her shoulders. "You've always been someone I can rely on," she said. "Sometimes I forget that." He answered quietly, "I'm not going anywhere." Rebecca moved to the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water. Her hands were steadier now, but her shoulders still held tension. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I don't know how to explain this to Daniel. I don't know how to keep everything together until he comes back." "You don't have to figure it out tonight," Ethan replied. "One step at a time. You got through today, and that's enough." She nodded, absorbing his words carefully. "Thank you." The house felt calmer now, but the air between them carried a new energy, gentle, emotional, and quietly intimate in a way that wasn't romantic but was deeply personal. Rebecca wasn't hiding anymore, and Ethan had become the person holding the space she needed. But before either of them could say anything more, a sudden knock echoed through the house, sharp, unexpected, and urgent. Rebecca froze. Ethan turned toward the door, his chest tightening again. "Are you expecting anyone?" he asked. She shook her head slowly, worry returning to her eyes. The silence stretched. The knock came again, and everything shifted once more. Ethan moved toward the door the moment the knock echoed through the house again. It wasn't loud enough to sound dangerous, but it carried a sense of urgency that instantly put him on alert. Rebecca stood behind him, frozen in place, her breath held as if she expected bad news. When Ethan opened the door and saw that it was only Mrs. Kingston, the elderly neighbor from across the street, the tension in his shoulders dropped a little. She stood holding a small envelope between her fingers, giving an apologetic smile. "This was in my mailbox by mistake," she said. "It's addressed to Rebecca." Rebecca stepped forward, thanking her politely. Her voice was steady, but Ethan could see that her hands trembled slightly when she took the envelope. Mrs. Kingston gave them both a warm nod before returning to her home. The door closed softly behind her, and silence filled the entryway again. Rebecca stared at the envelope for a second before walking back into the living room. Ethan followed, watching her carefully. She slid her finger under the flap and opened it with slow, hesitant movements, as if afraid of what she might find inside. A single sheet of paper slipped out. She unfolded it, eyes scanning line after line. Her expression changed so gradually that Ethan almost missed at the fear softening, the worry easing, the tension melting from her shoulders. Finally, she let out a shaky breath, one filled with relief instead of despair. "It's help," she said quietly. "It's a company that let me go. They're offering support for employees who were affected. There's a temporary assistance program I qualify for." She looked up at Ethan with wide, grateful eyes. "This will cover my bills until I find another job." For the first time all evening, Rebecca looked like she could breathe. Ethan felt something warm spread through him, not excitement, not pride, something deeper. Relief for her, hope for her, and a quiet gratitude that the world had given her. Something gentle today after a day full of storms. "I'm glad," he said softly. "You deserve some good news." She nodded slowly, holding the paper like it was something fragile and precious. Her shoulders finally relaxed, and she sank onto the couch, exhausted but lighter. Ethan sat beside her, but not too close still, giving her space while showing he wasn't going anywhere. "It feels like I've been holding my breath for hours," she admitted. She placed the letter on the coffee table and leaned back, closing her eyes for a moment. Ethan watched her quietly. She wasn't collapsed from sadness anymore. She was finally letting go of the tension she had been gripping all day. When she opened her eyes again, her gaze landed on Ethan. Something in her expression had changed. The fear was gone, replaced by calm gratitude. "Thank you for staying with us. I don't think I could have gotten through this evening without you." "You would have gotten through it," Ethan replied gently. "You're strong. You always have been." She shook her head softly. "Not tonight." Her voice was low, emotional. "Tonight I needed someone, and you were the first person I thought of." The weight of those words settled around them. Not romantic, not inappropriate, just honest. Rebecca wasn't someone who opened up easily. She guarded her feelings, kept her walls up. But tonight, she had let him in more than she probably realized. Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. He didn't want to say something. That would complicate things. He didn't want to cross any invisible line, but he did want her to know one simple truth. "You never have to face these things alone," he said. "You don't always have to carry everything by yourself." Rebecca looked at him with a small, tired smile. "You make it sound easy. It's easier with someone beside you," he replied. She didn't answer right away, but the way she looked at him said enough. There was trust, there new, tender, and unplanned. Something that neither of them had expected a few hours ago. After a long moment, she stood quietly. "I'm going to check on Liam," she said softly. Ethan nodded. While she walked upstairs, he stayed on the couch, staring at the letter on the table. This whole evening had taken turns he didn't expect. What started as a simple stop to return tools had become a moment that changed how he saw everything Rebecca. The quiet strength she hid, the exhaustion she carried, the way she looked at him when she needed someone she could trust. He didn't know what any of it meant, but he knew one thing clearly. He cared. More than he had realized, Rebecca returned after a few minutes, her expression calmer. "He's asleep," she said. "That's good," Ethan replied. She remained standing, for a moment as if unsure of what to say next. But then she walked back to the couch, sitting closer than before, not touching, but close enough that he could feel the warmth of her presence. "I think what scared me the most today," she said quietly, "was feeling like everything was slipping out of my control, losing my job, worrying about bills, trying to stay strong for Liam. It just overwhelmed me. Ethan nodded. It's a lot for anyone. She looked at him again, her expression softer than it had been all night. And then you showed up. You walked in right when I didn't know what to do. She smiled gently. You always seem to show up when I need someone. Her words carried a quiet warmth that settled deep inside him. I'm glad I was here, said. Silence filled the room again, but it wasn't heavy this time. It felt peaceful, like the calm after a storm. Rebecca sat back against the couch, closing her eyes for a moment. Ethan didn't speak. He just sat with her, sharing the silence. When she finally opened her eyes again, she spoke in a soft, sincere voice. I don't know what tomorrow will look like, but tonight I feel like I'm not falling apart anymore. And that's because of you. He didn't know what to say to that, so he simply nodded. Outside, the wind had quieted. Inside, the house felt warm and safe. Things weren't fixed completely, but something inside Rebecca had shifted. She wasn't carrying the weight alone, and Ethan, without planning it, had become the steady presence she needed. Whatever this connection was, gentle, emotional, unexpected, it was real, and it was growing. The next morning arrived quietly, with soft light filling the living room where Ethan had slept on the couch. He hadn't planned to stay the night, but after everything that happened, Rebecca insisted he shouldn't drive back so late. Was peaceful now? The kind of stillness that comes after a night of releasing things that had built up for months? Ethan sat up slowly, listening to the faint sound of someone in the kitchen. When he walked in, he found Rebecca already awake, making breakfast with a calmness he hadn't seen in her for a long time. She wore a soft smile, the first genuine one since yesterday. The exhaustion was still there, lightly shadowing her eyes, but something about her posture was lighter, steadier. She looked like a woman who had finally allowed herself to breathe. Morning, she said softly when she noticed him. I hope you slept okay. Better than I expected, Ethan replied. The couch wasn't too bad. She gave him a small laugh. Glad. It wasn't a loud laugh or a forced one. It was gentle, natural. The kind that made the room feel warmer without trying. Liam rushed in next, still half asleep but excited to see Ethan. You stayed here? He asked, eyes bright. Yeah, Ethan said, smiling. Wanted to make sure you and your mom were okay. Liam nodded with the kind of trust only a child could give. Glad you did. Rebecca set breakfast on the table, simple pancakes, fruit, and orange juice. It wasn't fancy, but it felt like a fresh start. They ate together, and for the first time since yesterday, no heavy silence hovered over them. Instead, the morning felt almost normal. Better than normal. It felt like something had quietly healed overnight. After breakfast, Ethan helped Liam pack his school things. Rebecca watched them from the doorway, her expression soft. There was something in her gaze that hadn't been there before. Gratitude. Yes, but also a gentle admiration. She didn't say it, but she didn't need to. When it was time to leave, Ethan offered to drive Liam to school. Rebecca hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Thank you, she said quietly, as they headed out the door. Ethan noticed she stood there a little longer than necessary, as if unsure of something she wanted to say, but not ready to speak it yet. The school drop-off was simple. Liam seemed happier, more relaxed, and when he hugged Ethan before running inside, it felt like something had strengthened between them, a bond that wasn't complicated. Just sincere. When Ethan returned, Rebecca was sitting on the porch steps, arms wrapped loosely around her knees. She looked up when she heard his footsteps, offering a soft smile. Can we talk? She asked. He sat beside her, waiting for her to continue. She didn't rush her words. She took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts, then began. Last night scared me, she said quietly. Not because of losing my job, not completely. It was more about realizing how alone I felt. She looked down at her hands. I've been trying so hard to keep everything together for months, pretending I'm fine, pretending I can handle everything. But the truth is, I've been exhausted. Ethan listened without interrupting. She continued. When I saw you, Walked through the door last night, I felt something I didn't expect. I felt safe, like I didn't have to pretend anymore. Her voice softened, and that's a feeling I haven't had in a long time. Her confession wasn't romantic in a dramatic way. It wasn't rushed or emotional in a chaotic sense. It was quiet, grounded, sincere. Ethan responded with equal honesty. You don't have to pretend with me, okay? I'm always going to be here for you. Not because I feel responsible, because I care. She turned toward him with a soft, vulnerable expression. I know, and that's what scares me a little. I didn't mean to depend on you this much. Her voice trembled slightly, not from fear of him, but from fear of needing someone again. Ethan spoke gently. It's not weakness to need support, it's human. Rebecca let out a slow, emotional breath. I know. I just forgot how to lean on someone. They sat quietly for a moment, letting the morning air wrap around them. The world felt calmer, more patient. Rebecca's hand rested beside her, and though they didn't touch, the closeness was enough to show how far they had come in a single night. Eventually she looked at him, a soft determination in her eyes. I'm going to be okay, she said. Yesterday felt like the end of everything, but this morning I feel different. That's good, Ethan said. She nodded. And I want you to know how much your support meant to me. If you didn't, judge me. You didn't act like I was broken. You just stayed. She paused, her voice gentle. That changed everything. Ethan felt something warm spread through him. Not excitement, not something reckless, something deeper. Respect, admiration, a growing affection that had been quiet for years but now felt impossible to ignore. Rebecca stood then, brushing off her jeans. Come inside. I want to talk about next steps, about work, about what I can do. Ethan followed her in, and they spent the next hour discussing her plans, baiting her resume, reaching out to contacts, checking job boards. She felt stronger with each minute, her confidence returning piece by piece. But every now and then, her gaze drifted to Ethan, softening as if remembering she wasn't carrying things alone anymore. When their talk was done, she walked him to the door. He expected her to thank him again, but she stepped a little closer instead. You know, she said gently, sometimes people come into our lives at the exact moment we need them most. She paused. I think you were that person. For me last night, her words sank deep. Ethan didn't move closer, didn't cross any lines. He simply held her gaze with the same warmth she offered him. And you're not alone anymore, he said quietly. A quiet smile touched her lips, a smile filled with relief, gratitude, and something new and unspoken. As he stepped off the porch, Rebecca whispered, barely loud enough for him to hear, I'm glad you came yesterday. Ethan turned back, meeting her eyes one last time. Me too, he said. She watched him walk away, her heart steady for the first time in months. Something between them had shifted, not dramatic, not rushed, but real, respectful, gentle, honest, and for both of them, everything from here on would be different. Not because of a single moment, but because of everything they faced together.